The Allfather's lament. They say even gods bleed. But what if the blood isn't from battle, but from a wound opened by time itself, counting down to absolute nothingness? Asterisk. Chapter 1, The First Whisper. The ravens came back wrong. Odin knew it the moment Hugin and Munin alighted on his shoulders that morning. Their usual chatter replaced by something that made his one good eye twitch. Their wings, normally sleek obsidian mirrors reflecting the golden halls of Asgard, seemed duller somehow. Dusty, like they'd been flying through ash. "What news from the 9 realms?" he asked, though his voice carried less authority than usual. The words felt heavy in his throat, tasting of copper and dread. Hugin tilted his head, fixing the Allfather with one black eye. "The wolves grow restless in Ironwood, Father. They're howling. It's different now." "Different how?" "Like they're counting down to something." Munin ruffled his feathers, a gesture that sent a chill through Odin's bones. The Norns at Urebrunner refused to speak today. They just sat there, spinning their threads, but their faces. The raven's voice trailed off into a whisper. They looked like they were weaving funeral shrouds. Odin's fingers tightened around Gungnir, his spear crackling with barely contained energy. He'd ruled the 9 realms for millennia, had sacrificed his eye for wisdom, hung himself from Yggdrasil for 9 days and nights to learn the secrets of the runes. He'd bargained with giants, outwitted dwarfs, and earned the fear of his enemies through cunning and ruthless determination. But this felt different. "Have you checked on our guest?" he asked, though he already knew the answer from the way both ravens shifted uncomfortably. "The bonds hold," Hugin replied, "but barely." The dwarf-forged chains strain against his struggles. "And the sounds he makes." The raven shuddered. "They're not the sounds of a beast anymore, Father. They're the sounds of something that knows its time is coming."
L'Okiesson.
The wolf. Even thinking the name made Odin's jaw clench until his teeth ached. Fenrir, bound by Gleipnir in the depths of Asgard, growing stronger with each passing day. The Norns had been clear about that particular prophecy. The wolf would break free, and when he did, he would devour the Allfather himself. "Double the guard," Odin commanded, though he knew it was futile. When the time came, no amount of guards would matter. The Norns had spoken, and their words were as immutable as the turning of the seasons. But that didn't mean he had to like it. The great hall of Gladsheim stretched before him, its golden pillars reaching toward a ceiling painted with scenes of past victories. The Einherjar, his chosen slain warriors, feasted at the long tables, their laughter echoing off the walls. They were preparing for the final battle, though most didn't know it yet. He'd been careful to keep that particular truth to himself. How do you tell your army that they're already dead? That all their training, all their preparation, was just a way to pass the time until the inevitable end? Odin walked among them, forcing his face into the mask of the confident ruler. He clapped shoulders, shared drinking horns, and listened to their tales of battle and glory. But all the while, his mind churned with the weight of knowledge he couldn't share. The Fimbulwinter was coming. 3 years of unrelenting cold that would make the harshest winters seem like gentle spring mornings. Brothers would turn against brothers. Fathers would raise weapons against their sons. The very fabric of order would unravel, leaving only chaos and bloodshed. And then would come the final battle. Ragnarok, the twilight of the gods. "Father!" Odin turned to find Frigg approaching, her face etched with concern. His wife had always been able to read him better than anyone else, even better than his ravens. She'd seen the signs too, he realized. The way his hands trembled sometimes when he thought no one was looking. The way he'd taken to staring at the horizon for hours, as if he could see the approaching doom written in the clouds. "The dreams are getting worse, Aren't they? She said softly, taking his arm and leading him away from the feasting warriors. Dreams. If only they were just dreams. But the visions that came to him in the darkest hours of the night were something else entirely. Prophecies made manifest, playing out behind his closed eye like some cosmic theater of horrors. He'd seen Thor fall, his mighty hammer Mjolnir slipping from dead fingers as the Midgard serpent's poison coursed through his veins. He'd watched Heimdall and Loki tear each other apart at the Rainbow Bridge. He'd witnessed the final confrontation between himself and Fenrir, had felt those massive jaws closing around his neck, had tasted his own blood as the wolf's teeth found their mark. How do you tell your army that they're already dead? That all their training, all their preparation, was just a way to pass the time until the inevitable end? Odin walked among them, forcing his face into the mask of the confident ruler. He clapped shoulders, shared drinking horns, and listened to their tales of battle and glory. But all the while, his mind churned with the weight of knowledge he couldn't share. The Fimbulwinter was coming. 3 years of unrelenting cold that would make the harshest winters seem like gentle spring mornings. Brothers would turn against brothers. Fathers would raise weapons against their sons. The very fabric of order would unravel, leaving only chaos and bloodshed. And then would come the final battle. Ragnarok, the twilight of the gods. Father! Odin turned to find Frigg approaching, her face etched with concern. His wife had always been able to read him better than anyone else, even better than his ravens. She'd seen the signs too, he realized. The way his hands trembled sometimes when he thought no one was looking. The way he'd taken to staring at the horizon for hours, as if he could see the approaching doom written in the clouds. The dreams are getting worse, aren't they? She said softly, taking his arm and leading him away from the feasting warriors. Dreams. If only they were just dreams. But the visions that came to him in the darkest hours of the night were something else entirely. Prophecies made manifest, playing out behind his closed eye like some cosmic theater of horrors. He'd seen Thor fall, his mighty hammer Mjolnir slipping from dead fingers as the Midgard serpent's poison coursed through his veins. He'd watched Heimdall and Loki tear each other apart at the Rainbow Bridge. He'd witnessed the final confrontation between himself and Fenrir, had felt those massive jaws closing around his neck, had tasted his own blood as the wolf's teeth found their mark. They're not dreams, he said finally. They're memories of things that haven't happened yet. Frigg's grip on his arm tightened. Then change them. You're the Allfather. You've defied fate before. Had he? Or had he simply been playing out his part in a script written by forces beyond even his comprehension? The thought made his stomach turn. All his schemes, all his sacrifices, all his desperate attempts to gather knowledge and power, had any of it mattered? Or was he just a puppet dancing to the Norns' tune? I need to check on the well, he said, pulling away from her. Mimir might have answers, but even as he spoke the words, he knew they were a lie. Mimir had been giving him the same cryptic warnings for months now. The dead giant's head, preserved in the waters of the Well of Wisdom, had become increasingly agitated of late. Its prophecies had taken on a desperate edge, as if even the wisest of the giants feared what was coming. The walk to Mimsbrunner took him through the heart of Asgard, past the great ash tree Yggdrasil whose roots connected all the 9 realms. The world tree had been showing signs of distress lately. Its leaves had begun to turn brown at the edges, and its branches creaked in winds that seemed to blow from nowhere. Even the tree knew. The well itself sat in a grove of ancient oaks, their gnarled branches forming a natural cathedral around the sacred spring. The water was dark as obsidian, reflecting nothing but the pale sky above. And floating in its center, eyes closed as if in meditation, was Mimir's severed head. You've come earlier than usual, the head said without opening its eyes. The visions are getting stronger, aren't they? Tell me how to stop it, Odin said, kneeling beside the well's edge. There has to be a way. Some loophole. Some trick I haven't thought of. Mimir's eyes opened, ancient and sad. You already know the answer, Allfather. You've always known. The only question is whether you have the strength to accept it. I've sacrificed everything. Odin's voice cracked with frustration. My eye, my comfort, my peace of mind. I've hung on the world tree until I died and came back. I've traveled to the realm of the dead and bargained with Hel herself. What more do you want from me? Nothing, Mimir said softly. The time for sacrifices is over. Now comes the time for endings. A sound echoed across the grove, a low, mournful howl that seemed to come from the very roots of the earth. It was followed by another, and another, until the air itself seemed to vibrate with the voices of countless wolves. It's starting, Mimir whispered. The bonds are weakening. Can you feel it? Odin could. There was a wrongness in the air, a sense of something fundamental shifting. The howls were coming from Ironwood, the dark forest where the wolves gathered. But they weren't just any wolves. These were the spawn of Fenrir, the get of the wolf who would devour the sun and moon. Skoll and Hati, the wolves who chased the celestial bodies across the sky, were running faster now. Their hunt was nearing its end. How long? Odin asked. Months, maybe weeks. The Fimbulwinter will begin when they catch their prey. Mimir's head bobbed gently in the dark water. 3 years of cold and darkness. 3 years of brother fighting brother. And then the final battle. And then the final battle. Odin stood, his joints protesting the movement. When had he become so old? When had the weight of eternity begun to press down on his shoulders like a physical thing? He'd always been the cunning one, the schemer, the god who could outwit anyone. But cunning meant nothing when the game was rigged from the start. As he walked back toward Gladsheim, the howling grew louder. It seemed to follow him, echoing off the golden walls of Asgard like a funeral dirge. The Einherjar were still feasting, still laughing, still preparing for battles they thought they could win. Poor bastards. They had no idea what was coming. And that's when the whispers truly began, not from the wind, but from the very roots of the world tree. ## Chapter 2. The Unraveling. The first sign came 3 weeks later, when the sun failed to rise on schedule. Odin stood on the walls of Asgard, watching the eastern horizon with growing dread. The sky should have been painted with the first blush of dawn by now, but instead, it remained the color of old blood. In the distance, he could hear the sound of pursuit, the panting of massive wolves, their claws scraping against the vault of heaven as they chased their celestial prey. It's happening, he whispered to no one in particular. The bastards are actually doing it. Hugin and Munin perched on either side of him, their usual morning chatter replaced by tense silence. They'd been bringing him increasingly disturbing reports from across the 9 realms. Earthquakes in Midgard, volcanic eruptions in Muspelheim, strange lights in the sky above Jotunheim that moved like dancing corpses. Father, Hugin said finally, there's something else. The ships in Helheim. They're moving. Odin's blood turned to ice. Moving how? Building something. A great vessel made of the nails of the dead. Naglfar. The ship made from the fingernails and toenails of corpses, prophesied to carry the army of the dead to the final battle. He'd hoped that particular prophecy was metaphorical, but the gods had never been lucky enough for their apocalypse to be purely symbolic. How far along are they? He asked, though he wasn't sure he wanted to know the answer. Hard to say. The mists of Helheim make it difficult to see clearly. But Hel herself was there, overseeing the construction. She looked. Munin paused, searching for words. She looked happy. Of course she did. Death had always been patient, content to wait for her time, and now that time was coming. Soon, the boundaries between life and death would blur, and she would inherit a universe of corpses. A commotion from the great hall drew his attention. Shouting voices, the clash of steel on steel. Odin hurried down from the walls, his ravens trailing behind him like shadows. He found chaos in Gladsheim. 2 of the Einherjar were locked in combat, their weapons flashing in the firelight. Around them, other warriors had formed a circle, cheering and placing bets as if this were some kind of entertainment. But Odin could see the truth in their eyes. This wasn't a friendly sparring match. These men were fighting with the desperate fury of cornered animals, their faces twisted with genuine hatred. "Enough!" he roared, his voice carrying the authority of ages. The combatants separated, breathing hard, but their hands remained on their weapons. "What is the meaning of this?" One of them, a berserker named Ulf, spat blood onto the golden floor. "This whoreson accused me of taking extra mead from the stores, called me a thief and a coward." "Because you are," the other warrior snarled. "I've seen you sneaking around the kitchens, hoarding food like some kind of rat. Planning to run when the fighting starts, aren't you?" Ulf's face went red with rage. "I'll show you who's a coward, you lying." "I said enough." Odin stepped between them, Gungnir crackling with eldritch energy. "Return to your quarters, both of you, and if I hear of any more fighting among the Einherjar, you'll find out what it's like to die twice." The warriors reluctantly sheathed their weapons, but the tension in the room remained thick as smoke. Odin could see it in their faces, the fear, the anger, the growing certainty that something was terribly wrong. The eternal feast was losing its flavor, the endless battles their appeal. They were starting to remember what it felt like to be afraid. After dismissing the crowd, Odin made his way to the Well of Ord, where the 3 Norns sat spinning the threads of fate. The ancient sisters rarely spoke to him directly, but he had to try. If there was any hope of changing what was coming, they would know. The well sat at the base of Yggdrasil, its waters reflecting the great tree's massive trunk. The Norns Urd, Verdandi, and Skuld sat beside it on their ancient thrones, their fingers never stopping their work, past, present, and future, weaving the destinies of gods and mortals alike. "I know you can hear me," Odin said, approaching slowly. "I know you know why I'm here." Ord, the eldest, looked up from her spinning. Her face was ancient beyond measure, carved with lines that spoke of eons of accumulated knowledge. "The Allfather comes seeking answers he already knows." "How predictable." "Then change the pattern," Odin said, falling to his knees before them. "You have the power. You control the threads of fate. Cut the ones that lead to Ragnarok. We've new ones." Verdandi, the middle sister, laughed, a sound like breaking glass. "You still don't understand, do you? We don't control fate, Allfather. We simply record it. The pattern was set long before the first star kindled in the void." "But you can see it all," Odin insisted. "Past, present, future. You know every possible outcome. There has to be a way to avoid this." The youngest Norn, Skuld, spoke without looking up from her work. "There is a way. There has always been a way." Odin's heart leaped. "Tell me." "Don't exist," she said simply. "Don't be born. Don't create the world. Don't set the events in motion that led to this moment. But since you did all of those things, here we are. You're saying it's my fault?" "We're saying it's inevitable," Ord replied. "Every choice you've made, every action you've taken, has brought you closer to this moment. The binding of Fenrir, the punishment of Loki, the building of Valhalla. All of it was necessary to create the conditions for the ending. Odin felt something break inside him. A lifetime of careful planning, of strategic thinking, of believing that intelligence and cunning could overcome any obstacle. All of it meaningless. All of it leading to this moment of absolute helplessness. "How much time do I have?" he asked. "Time." Skuld looked up, her eyes reflecting the terrible certainty of the future. "Time is an illusion, Allfather. The wolf is already free. The ships are already sailing. The fires are already burning. You're just catching up to what's already happened." A tremor ran through the ground beneath them, and somewhere in the distance, a chain snapped with a sound like thunder. "And that," Verdandi said with grim satisfaction, "would be the sound of your clever binding finally giving way." The howl that followed was unlike anything Odin had ever heard. It started low, a rumble that seemed to come from the very foundations of the world, then rose in pitch until it became a scream of pure rage and triumph. It was the sound of freedom after eons of imprisonment, of vengeance finally within reach. Fenrir was loose. Odin ran then, abandoning all pretense of divine dignity. He ran through the halls of Asgard, past the startled faces of his fellow gods, past the confused shouts of the Einherjar. He ran until his lungs burned and his legs trembled, but he could not outrun the knowledge that hunted him. The wolf was coming for him. The wolf had always been coming for him. And in the deepest, darkest part of his mind, a voice whispered the truth he'd been avoiding for so long. Asterisk, you thought the frost giants were bad? Wait until you hear what stirred in the depths of Niflheim. Asterisk. Chapter 3. The Wolves of Winter. The Fimbulwinter came like a lover's caress, slowly at first, then all at once. Odin stood at the highest tower of Asgard, watching the snow fall in sheets across the 9 realms. It wasn't the gentle snow of ordinary winters, the kind that blanketed the ground in pristine white and made children laugh with joy. This was something else entirely. This was snow that fell upward sometimes, defying the natural order. Snow that whispered secrets in dead languages. Snow that turned red when it touched the ground, as if the very 3 months had passed since Fenrir's escape, and the world had been dying by degrees ever since. The sun rose later each day and set earlier, as if reluctant to witness what was happening below. The temperature had dropped so far that even the fires of Muspelheim seemed dimmed, their eternal flames flickering like candles in a hurricane. And the wolves, Christ, the wolves were everywhere. "Father," Thor's voice came from behind him, heavy with exhaustion. "The reports from Midgard are getting worse. The humans are turning on each other. Whole villages burned to the ground. Families slaughtering each other over scraps of food." Odin didn't turn around. He couldn't bear to see the confusion in his son's eyes, the desperate hope that his father might have answers. How many dead? Thousands, maybe tens of thousands. It's hard to get accurate counts when the ravens won't fly there anymore. That was perhaps the most telling sign of all. Even his ravens, loyal beyond measure, had begun to refuse certain missions. They'd return from their scouting flights with their feathers singed and their eyes haunted, speaking of things that shouldn't exist, stalking the dark spaces between worlds. And the other realms? Alfheim has gone dark. Completely. The light elves have sealed themselves in their halls and won't answer our calls. Svartalfheim is in chaos. The dark elves are fighting among themselves over resources. Vanaheim. Thor paused, his voice catching. Vanaheim is burning. Father, the entire realm is on fire. Odin closed his eye, feeling the weight of failure settle on his shoulders like a lead cloak. All his preparations, all his careful planning, and still the end was coming faster than he'd anticipated. The Norns had been right, time was an illusion. The future was already here, wearing the disguise of an endless winter. What about Jotunheim? That's the strangest thing, Thor said. The giants are mobilizing, but not for war. They're leaving. Whole tribes packing up and heading for the borders of their realm. It's like they're evacuating. They know what's coming, Odin said quietly. They've always known. The giants remember the old stories, the ones from before the world was made. They know how this ends. A commotion from the courtyard below drew their attention. Odin looked down to see a group of Einherjar dragging something through the snow. Something that fought and snarled and left a trail of black blood in its wake. What in hell's name is that? Thor breathed. Odin knew. He'd been expecting this, dreading it, but expecting it nonetheless. Bring it to the great hall, he called down to the warriors. And double the guard. That thing is more dangerous than it looks. The creature they'd captured was roughly the size of a horse, but that was where any resemblance to normal animals ended. Its body was covered in matted fur that seemed to absorb light, making it difficult to focus on. Its eyes were the color of fresh blood, and its mouth was full of teeth that didn't belong to any earthly predator. One of Fenrir's spawn, Odin explained as they watched the warriors chain the beast to the floor of the great hall. They've been appearing all over the 9 realms, hunting in packs, killing anything that moves. This is what happens when the barriers between worlds start to break down. How many are there? Hundreds, maybe thousands, and they're getting stronger. Odin gestured to the creature, which had stopped struggling and was now staring at him with unsettling intelligence. Look at its eyes, Thor. It knows who I am. It knows why it's here. The wolf thing's lips pulled back in what might have been a smile, revealing rows of needle-sharp teeth. When it spoke, its voice was like breaking glass wrapped in honey. Allfather, it said, the words dripping with mockery. How good to finally meet you in person. My sire has told me so much about you. Thor's hammer was in his hand instantly, crackling with lightning. The damn thing can talk. Of course I can talk, the creature said. I'm not some mindless beast. I'm a herald, a messenger. I've come to deliver an invitation. An invitation to what? Odin asked, though he already knew. To the final feast, of course. The one where you're the main course. The wolf thing's laugh was like the sound of children screaming. My sire is gathering his army. The dead are rising from their graves. The ships are sailing from Helheim. And the fire giants are sharpening their swords. Tell me something I don't know, Odin said. Oh, but I will. The creature's eyes gleamed with malicious glee. Did you know that Loki has been having the most interesting conversations with the other prisoners? The ones you thought were safely bound? They're all getting restless, Allfather. All of them. And when they break free. The wolf thing's words were cut off as Thor's hammer took its head clean off. The body convulsed once, then went still. But the head kept talking. You can't kill the message by killing the messenger, it said, its voice now coming from the severed head. The words have already been spoken. The invitation has been delivered. Will you accept? Odin picked up the head, feeling the weight of prophecy in his hands. I've been accepting it my whole life, he said. I just didn't know it. The head's eyes closed, and when they opened again, they were no longer the eyes of a wolf. They were the eyes of the Norns, ancient and knowing and terrible. Then you understand, it said in their voice. The pattern is complete. The web is woven. The only question now is whether you'll face the ending as a god or as a coward. I'll face it as what I've always been, Odin said. A man who made too many deals with forces he didn't understand. The head smiled one last time, then crumbled to dust. Outside, The wind howled with the voices of the dead, and the snow continued to fall. But now Odin could hear something else in the storm, the sound of ships' bells, ringing across the waters of Helheim, the sound of an army on the march, the sound of the ending of the world. Thor placed a hand on his father's shoulder. "What do we do now?" Odin looked at his son, seeing the warrior he'd raised, the god he'd trained to be his successor. But there would be no succession now, no passing of the torch, only the final battle and the darkness that would follow. "Now," Odin said, "now we wait for the wolves to come home." Chapter 4, The Gathering Storm. The War Council convened at midnight, when the boundary between nightmare and reality grew thin. Odin sat at the head of the great table in Gladsheim, his remaining eye scanning the faces of the assembled gods. They were all there, the ones who mattered anyway, the ones who would stand with him when the final battle came. Thor, his hammer resting across his knees like a promise of violence. Frigg, her face carved from marble and determination. Tyr, the war god, his empty sleeve a reminder of what it cost to bind monsters. Heimdall, the watchman, his golden eyes reflecting light that existed nowhere else. And conspicuously absent, Loki. "The signs are accelerating," Odin began, his voice carrying the weight of absolute authority. "The wolves have devoured the sun and moon. The Fimbulwinter has locked the realms in ice. The dead are stirring in their graves, and our former ally has broken free of his bonds." A murmur rippled through the assembled gods. They'd all heard the rumors, the whispered reports from the few ravens brave enough to venture into the darker corners of the 9 realms. Loki the Bound had become Loki the Free, and his freedom meant only one thing: the final phase of Ragnarok had begun. "Where is he now?" Frigg asked, her voice steady despite the fear Odin could see in her eyes. "Everywhere and nowhere," Heimdall replied. "He's learned to hide from my sight, which should be impossible. But then, he always was the most gifted of shapeshifters. He could be anyone, anywhere. He could be in this room right now." "Everywhere and nowhere," Heimdall replied. "He's learned to hide from my sight, which should be impossible. But then, he always was the most gifted of shapeshifters. He could be anyone, anywhere. He could be in this room right now." The gods glanced at each other suspiciously, and Odin felt a familiar stab of frustration. This was exactly what Loki wanted: paranoia, discord, the bonds of trust stretched to their breaking point. Even imprisoned, even bound, he'd continued to poison everything he touched. "He's not here," Odin said firmly. "I can sense his presence, and he's far from Asgard. He's recruiting, gathering his army. The giants of Jotunheim, the fire demons of Muspelheim, the dishonored dead of Helheim. Every enemy we've ever made, every slight we've ever given. He's calling in those debts." "Then we need to strike first," Thor said, his voice like rumbling thunder. "Hit them before they can organize. I can be in Jotunheim within the hour. Scatter their forces."
No.
Odin's voice cut through his son's words like a blade. "That's exactly what he wants. He knows us too well, knows how we think. He's counting on our aggression, our need to act. Every move we make plays into his hands." "Then what do you suggest?" Tyr asked. "We sit here and wait for them to come to us?" "We prepare," Odin said. "We gather our own forces. The Einherjar are already here, but we need more. Call in every favor, every debt, every alliance we've made over the centuries. If this is to be the final battle, then let it be fought with everything we have." "And if it's not enough?" Frigg's question hung in the air like a curse. Odin met her gaze, seeing the woman who'd stood by him through ages of triumph and sorrow, the woman who'd shared his bed and his burdens, who'd watched him sacrifice piece after piece of himself in pursuit of wisdom and power. The woman who deserved better than the truth he was about to tell her. "Then we die well," he said. "We die as gods should die, with weapons in our hands and curses on our lips. We make them pay for every inch of ground, every drop of blood. And maybe, just maybe, something will survive to remember us." The silence that followed was deafening. These were beings who had existed since the dawn of time, who had shaped the cosmos with their will and their strength. The idea of their own mortality was as foreign to them as the concept of mercy to a wolf. But mortality was coming for them anyway, wearing the face of inevitability. "There is another option," a new voice said from the shadows at the edge of the hall. The gods turned as one, hands moving to weapons, but Odin merely sighed. He'd been expecting this visitor, dreading it, but expecting it nonetheless. "Hello, Loki," he said. The figure that stepped into the light was barely recognizable as the trickster god they'd known. The long imprisonment had changed him, twisted him into something that existed at the intersection of god and monster. His face was gaunt, his eyes the color of old blood, and his smile was the kind that belonged on corpses. "Surprised to see me?" Loki asked, his voice carrying the same mocking tone it always had. "I thought I'd drop by, say hello to my old friends, share a drink, perhaps, talk about old times." "You're not supposed to be here," Heimdall said, his hand moving to his sword. "The barriers around Asgard should have kept you out." "Barriers?" Loki laughed. "What barriers? You mean the ones I helped design? The ones I know every weakness of? Please, I've been walking through your defenses for weeks. I could have killed you all in your sleep if I'd wanted to." "Why didn't you?" Thor asked, Mjolnir crackling with barely contained lightning. "Because that would have been too easy," Loki replied. "Too quick, too merciful. I want you to suffer first. I want you to know what it feels like to be helpless, to be bound, to watch everything you love crumble to dust while you can do nothing to stop it." "Get to the point," Odin said. "You mentioned another option." "Ah yes, always the practical one, aren't you, Allfather?" Loki's smile widened. "The option is simple. Surrender. Give up. Let the ending come without resistance. Make it easy on yourselves." "And why would we do that?" "Because the alternative is so much worse." Loki's eyes gleamed with anticipation. "You see, old friend, you've never really understood the nature of prophecy. You think it's about fate, about destiny, about things that must happen. But it's really about choices, about the paths we choose to walk." "Explain." "The Norns showed you one possible future, the one where you fight and die, where the world burns and is reborn. But there are other futures, other paths, darker ones, ones where the suffering never ends, where the dead rise again and again, where the cycle of violence continues for eternity." Odin felt something cold settle in his stomach. "You're talking about the eternal return." "I'm talking about making this last forever," Loki said. "Every death, every betrayal, every moment of agony, repeated endlessly. A cosmos trapped in its own death throes, never quite dying, never quite living. That's the future I can offer you. That's the choice you get to make." "You're insane." "Am I?" Loki's voice dropped to a whisper. "Or am I just honest about what we are? We're not heroes, Odin. We're not the good guys. We're killers and thieves and liars who convinced ourselves we were gods. And now it's time to pay the price." "The price for what?" "For everything. For binding me. For casting out my children. For building your golden halls on a foundation of blood and bones. For thinking you could cheat death itself." Loki began to fade, his form becoming translucent. "I'll give you time to think about it, but not much time. The armies are already marching. The ships are already sailing. And the wolves are already at your door. As he disappeared, his laughter echoed through the hall like the sound of breaking glass. The gods sat in stunned silence, each lost in their own thoughts, their own fears. Finally, Odin spoke. Double the guard, triple it, and send word to every realm, every ally we have left. If Loki wants a war, we'll give him one. But we'll do it on our terms, not his. And if he's right? Frigg asked quietly. If this is just the beginning of something worse? Odin looked at his wife, his companions, his fellow gods. They were all he had left, all that stood between order and chaos. And they were all going to die. Then we die anyway, he said. But at least we die fighting. Outside, the wind howled with the voices of the damned, and in the distance, the sound of drums echoed across the frozen wastes. The final battle was coming, and with it, the end of everything they'd ever known. But first, there would be one last conversation. One final meeting with the creature that had haunted his dreams for so long. Asterisk, you thought the frost giants were bad? You were wrong. The giants were nothing compared to what was coming. Asterisk. Hashtag chapter 5. The wolf's grin continued. The binding place was exactly as Odin remembered it. A barren island in the middle of a lake that reflected no light, surrounded by cliffs that seemed to absorb sound. It was here, in this place of eternal twilight, that they had bound Fenrir with Gleipnir, the impossible chain forged by the dwarfs from the sound of a cat's footfall and the breath of a fish. Now the chain lay in pieces, scattered across the black stone like broken promises. Odin stood at the edge of the ruined binding circle, his ravens perched nervously on his shoulders. The silence was absolute, pressing against his eardrums like a physical weight. But he knew the wolf was here. He could smell the copper scent of old blood, the musk of predator fur, the sharp tang of barely contained rage. I wondered when you'd come. A voice rumbled from the shadows between the standing stones. Though I expected you sooner. Has the great Allfather finally learned patience in his old age? Fenrir stepped into the pale light, and Odin's breath caught in his throat. The wolf had grown, not just in size, though he was easily the height of a horse now, his shoulders broader than a ship's beam, but in presence. There was something about him that hurt to look at directly, as if he existed in too many dimensions at once. You've changed, Odin said, surprised by how steady his voice sounded. Have I? Fenrir's lips pulled back in what might have been a smile, revealing teeth like ivory daggers. Or have you just finally learned to see me clearly? I was always this Allfather. I was always your death walking on 4 legs. You just chose to see a puppy instead. I saw a threat. I acted to contain it. You saw a child. Fenrir's voice was soft now, almost gentle. A child who trusted you, who believed your promises, who thought the gods were his family. The accusation hit like a physical blow. Odin remembered that day so clearly. The young wolf, barely more than a pup, bounding through the halls of Asgard. The way he'd played with the other gods. The way he'd looked at Odin with something that might have been love. Before the prophecies. Before the fear. Before the binding. I did what I had to do, Odin said. You did what you were afraid to do properly. Fenrir began to pace, his massive paws making no sound on the stone. You should have killed me when I was young. Quick, clean, merciful. But you couldn't. Could you? Some part of you still saw the child. So instead, you chose the cruelest option of all. You made me live with the knowledge of my own imprisonment. The Norns. The Norns saw what they saw because of what you chose to see, Fenrir interrupted. Prophecy isn't carved in stone, old man. It's written in the choices we make, the paths we walk. You chose to fear me, so I became fearsome. You chose to bind me, so I became bound. You chose to make me your enemy, so I became your death. The wolf stopped pacing and fixed Odin with eyes that held the depth of eternity. But here's the thing about prophecy, Allfather. It cuts both ways. You're not just fated to die by my jaws. I'm fated to kill you. Do you know what that means? Odin felt his mouth go dry. What? It means I don't have a choice either. I'm as trapped by this ending as you are. I'm going to kill you, and then I'm going to die, and then the world is going to burn. And there's nothing either of us can do to stop it. Unless we choose to write a different ending. The words hung in the air between them like a challenge. Odin studied the wolf's face, looking for deception, for trickery, for the trap he was certain must be hidden in the offer. But all he saw was a terrible, weary honesty. What are you proposing? A trade, Fenrir said. A bargain, the kind the gods are so fond of making.
I'm listening.
I'll give you a way out, a path that doesn't end with your death and the burning of the world. But it will cost you. Everything costs something. What's your price? Fenrir's smile was sharp as winter. Your eye. Odin's hand moved instinctively to his face, to the patch that covered the empty socket where his eye had once been. I already sacrificed my eye. For wisdom, for the runes, for the knowledge of how to prevent this. You sacrificed your eye for the wisdom of the past, Fenrir said. I'm offering you the wisdom of the future, the sight to see beyond the ending, to the path that leads away from Ragnarok. And all it will cost me is my remaining eye, my sight entirely. Your sight, yes, but not your vision. There's a difference, Allfather, a difference you should understand better than most. Odin weighed the offer, turning it over in his mind like a puzzle with too many pieces. It sounded too good to be true, which in his experience meant it probably was. But what choice did he have? The alternative was the ending he'd already seen, the death he'd already accepted. Why? He asked. Why would you offer this? You have every reason to want me dead. Because I'm tired, Fenrir said simply. Tired of being the monster in everyone's nightmares. Tired of being the ending of all stories. Tired of being trapped in a prophecy that gives me no choice but to be the thing that destroys everything I might have loved. The wolf's voice cracked slightly on the last word, and Odin saw something in his eyes he'd never expected to see there. Pain. Not the physical pain of imprisonment, but the deeper agony of a soul that had been twisted into something it never wanted to be. If I accept, Odin said carefully, what happens then? What's this path you're offering? You'll have to trust me to find out. And trust, as I'm sure you'll agree, has never been our strongest suit. Odin was quiet for a long moment, listening to the sound of his own breathing, the distant whisper of wind across water. In the distance, he could hear the drums of war, the marching of armies, the cries of the dying. The world was ending whether he acted or not. At least this way, there might be a chance for something different. If I do this, he said, and you're lying and this is just another trap, then you'll die anyway, Fenrir finished, just as you would have if you'd never come here. The only difference is the manner of your death. And if you're telling the truth, then maybe we both get to write a different ending to this story. Odin reached up and removed the patch from his remaining eye. The organ was pale blue like winter sky, and it had seen too much over the centuries. Wars and betrayals, love and loss, the rise and fall of civilizations. It had watched the world grow old and tired, had seen the cracks forming in the foundations of reality itself. Will it hurt? He asked. Everything worthwhile hurts, Fenrir replied. But not for long. Odin nodded and stepped forward, extending his hand toward the wolf. Then let's see what lies beyond the ending. Fenrir's jaws opened, revealing teeth like polished bone, and Odin felt the world explode into white-hot pain. But beneath the agony, he felt something else, a shifting, a changing, a fundamental alteration in the nature of reality itself. And then, for the first time in his existence, Odin the Allfather truly saw. Chapter 6. The Sight Beyond Sight. The pain was absolute, consuming, transforming. It wasn't just the physical agony of losing his eye, though that was considerable, but the deeper trauma of having his entire perception of reality restructured in an instant. Odin felt his consciousness expand, stretch, then snap back like a rubber band, leaving him gasping and blind on the cold stone of the binding circle. Breathe. Fenrir's voice came from somewhere both very close and impossibly far away. Let it settle. The sight takes time to adjust. I can't see anything, Odin gasped. His hands pressed against the empty sockets where his eyes had been. There's nothing but darkness. That's because you're still trying to see with eyes that no longer exist, the wolf said, his voice gentle now, almost tender. The sight I've given you doesn't work that way. You need to look with something deeper. Odin forced himself to stop grasping for the familiar sensation of vision, to stop expecting light and color and the comfortable illusion of a world that made sense. Instead, he let his awareness drift, float, expand beyond the boundaries of his physical form. And then he saw. It wasn't sight in any conventional sense. It was more like understanding made manifest, knowledge transformed into perception. He could see the threads of fate, the connections between all things, the web of cause and effect that stretched across time and space. He could see the past and future simultaneously, could perceive the branching paths of possibility that spread out from every moment like fractal patterns. By the tree, he whispered. This is what you see. All the time. All the time, Fenrir confirmed. Every possible future, every potential ending, every choice that could be made and its consequences. Do you understand now why I was so tired? Why I wanted to escape the prophecy that bound me? Odin did understand. The weight of infinite possibility was crushing, maddening. He could see not just his own death at the wolf's jaws, but 10,000 variations of it. He could see the burning of the world, the flooding of the realms, the endless cycle of creation and destruction that stretched back to the beginning of time and forward to its end. But he could also see something else. Paths that diverged from the main thread, possibilities that led away from Ragnarok entirely. They were faint, fragile, like spider silk in a hurricane, but they existed. There, he said, pointing to a particular convergence of possibilities. That thread, it's different from the others. Yes, Fenrir said. That's the path I wanted to show you. But look closer. Look at what it costs. Odin focused his new sight on the divergent thread, tracing its path through the web of fate. What he saw made his blood run cold. The path existed, yes, but it required a sacrifice so profound that it would fundamentally change the nature of existence itself. The gods would have to die, he said. All of us, not just in body but in essence. We would have to surrender our divine nature, become mortal, accept the limitations of flesh and time. And in return, the world would be spared. The cycle of Ragnarok would be broken. But the price? Odin trailed off, seeing the full implications. The price is everything we are. Everything you think you are, Fenrir corrected. But perhaps not everything you could be. Odin saw it then, the strange beauty of the path Fenrir was offering. Yes, the gods would die as gods, but they would live as something else. As mortals, yes, but mortals with the accumulated wisdom of eternity. They would guide the world not through power and fear, but through understanding and compassion. Why show me this? Odin asked. Why give me the choice? Because I realized something while I was bound, Fenrir said. The prophecy that made me your death also made you my father. In a twisted way, you created me. You fed me on fear and anger and the certainty of doom. I am what I am because of what you made me. And now I'm offering you the chance to create something different. Not just for yourself, but for all of us. A world where the cycles of violence and revenge finally end. Odin studied the wolf with his new sight, seeing past the monstrous exterior to the soul beneath. What he found there surprised him. Yes, there was anger, centuries of it, justified and burning bright. But there was also something else. Love. Twisted and bitter and nearly destroyed, but still there. The remnant of what the young wolf had felt for his adoptive father, before the binding, before the betrayal. If I choose this path, Odin said, what happens to you? I become mortal too, Fenrir said. I lose my supernatural size, my cosmic significance. I become just a wolf, a large one perhaps, but still just an animal. I die when animals die, live as they live. And that's what you want? What I want is to stop being the ending of all stories. If that means becoming just another character in the story instead of its conclusion, then yes, that's what I want. Odin closed his ruined eyes, or rather, the spaces where his eyes had been, and let his new sight show him the full scope of what was being offered. He saw the armies marching toward Asgard, saw Loki's fleet approaching across the dark waters, saw the fire giants sharpening their swords. He saw the final battle that would consume everything, the flames that would eat the world, the long darkness that would follow. But he also saw the other path, the narrow, treacherous road that led away from ending toward something that might be called hope. There's one more thing, Fenrir said quietly. If you choose this path, you'll have to convince the others. The gods, the armies, everyone. They'll have to choose to give up their power, their immortality, their very nature. And most of them won't want to. Then I'll have to make them understand. How? Odin smiled, and for the first time in centuries, it wasn't the smile of a schemer or a manipulator. It was the smile of someone who had finally found a truth worth telling. By showing them what I've seen, by sharing the sight you've given me, by making them understand that true power isn't the ability to destroy, but the wisdom to choose not to. And if they refuse, then at least I'll have tried. At least I'll have offered them something other than the ending they've been expecting. Fenrir was quiet for a long moment, and when he spoke, his voice was softer than Odin had ever heard it. Thank you. For what? For seeing me as something other than a monster. For the first time in my existence, someone looked at me and saw a choice instead of a destiny. Odin reached out with his new sight, found the thread of possibility that led away from Ragnarok, and grasped it firmly. The path was treacherous, uncertain, and would require sacrifices that would make his previous offerings seem trivial by comparison. But it was a path. It was a choice. And for the first time since the Norns had spoken their prophecy, Odin felt something he'd almost forgotten existed. Hope. Come, he said to Fenrir. We have a world to save. And if we're very lucky, we might even figure out how to save ourselves in the process. The wolf nodded, and together they began the long journey back to Asgard, carrying between them the weight of a new possibility and the fragile hope that even the end of the world might not be the end of the story. Behind them, the binding circle stood empty, its broken chains a testament to the power of choice over fate. And in the growing light of a dawn that shouldn't have been possible, the first signs of a different kind of ending began to show themselves in the brightening sky.